go to Arkansas. We'll talk with Andre. Hey, Andre, what's on your heart tonight?
Hello, Dr. Andrew. Hey,
Hey.
quick question. We're studying at church a series that's something like, did he really say that, and is it really in the Bible? And I've heard you talk about this, but what we're hearing in our small group is that we are sinner and saint at the same time. And I'm really not confused about my identity, but can you address why we are constantly being told that we're sinner and saint, and is that in the Bible?
Yeah. Well, there's this Latin phrase is simul justus et peccator, and people are using that to sound educated and scholarly, simultaneously sinner and saint, simultaneously saint and sinner. And the bottom line is the Bible doesn't actually teach that to believers. Do we commit sins? Yes. Are we sinners by nature now? No. The whole point is your old self died. Romans chapter 6. You were crucified with Christ. Galatians 2:20. You died with Jesus to the elementary principles of this world. Colossians tells us. So again and again and again, we're told that we're not the same person we used to be. Such were some of you, but you were washed, you were justified, you were sanctified. So I think there's just an important distinction that we need to make between who we were and who we are now. And this sort of mixed message of you're both a sinner and saint, what people think they're doing is they think they're creating a state of humility for us that will really just be humble if we run around thinking, well, I'm half sinner and half saint, or I'm both sinner and saint, and I have two identities, and that's just what humility looks like. Well, that's not true humility. That's groveling. We're groveling in the corner like a dirty, rotten worm. And the reality is that true humility is saying the same thing that God says about you, no more, but also no less than what God says about you. So that's the truth about humility. We want to have God's vantage point and God's perspective on us. He says we are a new creation. The old is gone. The new has come. The old self died. We're a brand new child of God, born of the Spirit, partakers of the divine nature, united with Christ. That's our identity. And quite frankly, I think it deserves to be said that despite what you've heard in church, there's not a single instance in any New Testament letter. Get this now. There's 0 instances in any New Testament letter of a Christian being called a sinner. We're called saints every single time, to the saints at Rome, to the saints at Corinth, to the saints at Ephesus. The Corinthians were in pretty bad shape behavior-wise. They were having divisions and factions. One guy was having inappropriate relations with his father's wife. A bunch of them were getting drunk and hoarding all the food at the Lord's Supper, and yet Paul addresses them as saints. So we're not the sum total of what we do. We're the sum total of what Jesus did. And we don't have a works-based righteousness, so how could we be half sinner, half saint? If our righteousness comes from the finished work of Jesus, then it sounds to me like we're all saint. So we are saints who sometimes sin. Hear that now. Obviously, we still sin, we commit sins, but we are saints who sometimes sin. We are not sinners by nature anymore. So somebody says, well, what about Paul, who declared himself to be the chief of sinners? Well, in context, he was talking about his life as a killer of Christians. He was an assassin of the church. He murdered, persecuted, and killed God's people. So in that context, he was saying that he set a world record for sins. But it goes on to say, but God showed me mercy, and God showed me his grace. And the whole point that Paul is making is that if God could show a guy like me his grace and then save me, then what about you? So we have no business running to the chief of sinners passage and calling ourselves dirty, rotten sinners. We are holy, righteous saints, blameless and united with Christ at the very core of our being. Thanks for your call tonight, Andre. Reach out to us again anytime. Great to hear from you.